Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Unitarian Society of Santa Barbara on this sensationally sunny, almost height of the sun summer solstice morning. Welcome to all of you here in body in this sanctuary and the wider circle up there online. We at the Unitarian Society of Santa Barbara are a community that leads with our hearts and love, striving to live our lives with integrity, nurture wonder and curiosity, and inspire the actions that inspire us and transform us and the world. Wherever you are on your journey, whether you've come in here today for hope or inspiration, for strength or comfort, for meaning or community, we're glad you tuned into this service or passed through these open doors this morning. All people of goodwill are welcome. My name is Kier Zecker, and I'm a member of the worship arts team here. I'm delighted this morning to be working with Dr. Jenna Tosh, the president and CEO of Planned Parenthood Central Coast, our music director, Matthew Grissett, our director of religious exploration, Charla Brigante, Heather Levins on piano, our chancel choir is here this morning, and all the ushers and tech crews keeping us rolling. In planning the focus for this service with Jenna, she came up with a series of questions that center around key moments in our lives, key moments that have helped us to understand the injustices around us, to clarify our values and help us grow. And I'd like to put these questions out in the beginning for you to keep in mind as we share our personal reflections from our journey. What were those key moments of understanding in your life? Has your understanding of the issues you are passionate about evolved over your life? And how can we maintain hope and wholeness through the big wins and major setbacks of movement work? I'd also like to extend a special welcome this morning to any visitors, guests, friends, or family members that are joining us for the first time today. Please sign our virtual guest book online or stop by our visitors table outside. This allows us to stay in touch with you, not only for what's going on here on Sundays, but throughout the week, how we stay connected with each other. Also today is a special opportunity if you're new and curious about learning more about what goes on here or Unitarian Universalism. There'll be a short visitors meeting at 11:15 in the office outside the courtyard with Sally Hamilton. She's out there, look for Sally. And one more opportunity in the courtyard after service or online until June 20th is to sign up for USSB's Summer Read. And this is a series of 3 book discussions over the summer. The chosen book is Awe by Dasher Keltner. And not awe as in, oh, what a cute kitten, but awe as the wonder, the surprise, the reverence we can tap into for transformation and happiness in our lives. So look for that RE table out there after service to sign up, or your Friday email has the link. I invite you now to take a breath. Take a pause and notice where you're at. Settle and ground your body comfortably in your space. Maybe put both feet on the floor and close your eyes. Allow yourself to arrive in this space, this community, the hour we have together, and let the sound of our bell connect us.
Good morning. As Unitarian Universalists, we light our chalice at the beginning of each service to create a communal, sacred space for our reflection, prayer, meditation, and music. Those of you joining us from home are part of this space, and now it is time to add your light by typing in "Chalice is lit" in the name of your street. We light this chalice in memory of the courage of those who have struggled for freedom, the persistence of those who've struggled for justice, and the love of those who've built beloved communities to carry on the light of hope.
One of the remedies for finding hope in challenging times or challenging work is to take a moment and intentionally turn ourselves towards the good in the world, to lift up actions around us that are moving us towards a world with more justice, equity, and compassion. And we invite you to think about something that you've witnessed or heard this week that's inspired you and share it at coffee hour. I heard rumor there was some good news around the teachers' agreement, so do share that at coffee hour with me and others. And I've asked Jenna, who works in the forefront of reproductive health justice work, to hold up our communal entry today.
Good morning. Since the Dobbs versus Jackson women's health decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade, there has been a public outcry for abortion rights. Citizen-led ballot initiatives have passed in every state where they have been introduced, including in places once thought of as irredeemably anti-choice, places like Kentucky, Montana, Kansas, and Ohio. Here in California, in the months after Dobbs, we passed Proposition 1, securing the right to abortion and birth control in the California Constitution, with 67% of the vote. Recently, the Arizona Supreme Court recognized a law from the 1800s, a total abortion ban, as the law of the land, but advocates were already ready with a measure for the November ballot. In Florida, when an almost total abortion ban went into effect, a ballot measure which had already secured over 1 million signatures was slated for the ballot this November. When politicians and the courts fail us, voting, organizing, and advocating is the work of hope.
Let us rise and body your spirit to sing our opening hymn, 1024 in the teal hymnal, When the Spirit Says Do. You got to do when the Spirit says do. You got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you got to do, oh Lord, you got to do when the Spirit says do. Spirit says do, 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 Spirit says do. You got to sing when the Spirit says sing. You got to sing when the Spirit says sing. When the Spirit says sing, you got to sing, oh Lord. You got to sing when the Spirit says sing. Spirit says sing, Spirit says sing, Spirit says sing. Spirit says sing, Spirit says sing, Spirit says sing. You got to dance when the Spirit says dance. You got to dance when the Spirit says dance. When the Spirit says dance, you got to dance, oh Lord. You got to dance when the Spirit says dance. 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 You got to do when the Spirit says do. You got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you got to do, oh Lord. You got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 Spirit says do.
Good morning. It is that time. Am I on here? Yes, it is that time in the service where we invite any children and children at heart to come up for a story. We hope you'll join us. Come on up. You can have a seat right on the steps.
Comes a couple of kiddos.
Oh, what do we have here? This morning's story, I'm going to just tell you real quick, is an adaptation of this story called More Than Fluff by Madeline Valentine. We hope you enjoy our production.
This is Daisy. This. Oh, okay.
Say hi. Yeah.
Daisy happened to be very fluffy. Being fluffy was all anyone noticed about her.
Aww,
Aren't you the cutest thing?
I could just eat you up.
You're so adorable.
They squeezed her, they petted her, they kissed her, they popped out of nowhere and tried to hug her. Only at home could Daisy relax.
Why do I have to be so soft? I'm not just fluff. I have substance.
What about a smooch?
Something had to change. Daisy decided the time was right for a new look. She ran out into the yard to the nearest mud puddle. It was a kind of mud puddle that was dark and sticky and extra smelly. Where's her mud? We lost it. Ah, there we go. Her new look was spectacular. And it worked like a charm. No one wanted to get near her, but it was also kind of icky, a bit sticky, and super, super stinky. Ugh. Daisy washed off the mud, and by the end of the day, she was right back where she started. Daisy couldn't take it anymore.
I am more than fluff.
Daisy's dad decided it was time for a talk. Daisy, honey, I know you're angry, but you cannot headbutt others in the belly.
But everybody cuddles me even when I don't want them to.
Have you tried talking to them, telling them how you feel, nicely? Daisy hatched a plan.
It's time for your afternoon cuddle.
Actually, it's time for you to give me a little personal space.
I just want to give you a big squeeze.
How about a high five instead?
With a little practice, Daisy got the hang of letting everyone know just what she wanted.
Hugs!
Hi, how about a low five instead?
Hugs!
How about a pinky shake? Okay, super low five.
Everyone learned to give Daisy some space when she wanted it, and she did the same for them.
Hugs?
No hugs, thank you.
Okay, I understand.
Daisy happened to be fluffy, and that suited her just fine. At bedtime that night, Dad tucked her in and he said, "Would you like me to read you a story before bed?"
Yes, please. I'd also love a good night hug, if you would.
Oh, Daisy, I'm always glad to give you a hug.
Thanks, Dad. I want to give you an extra big hug today because it's Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day to everyone who fathers someone. May you all get lots of hugs today, but only if you want them.
And that's our time for all ages this morning, and we'll sing our children out to our Makerspace program.
We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go. To nurture the spark of your precious life. We hold you in our love as you go.
This is a poem called The Journey by Mary Oliver. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds. And there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. I love this Mary Oliver poem that Jenna sent over last week to read during this service because it invites all of us into this glimpse of ourselves along the path. And when we have dared to listen to our own truth and venture into a more meaningful, authentic life. For me, I found a strong resonance with the time in my life when I was struggling with alcohol addiction and the fierce determination I needed to find to save my own life. But it wasn't a determination born of self-will. This was the courage that was required me to step away from the clamoring voices of the past. It's Father's Day today, and I'm missing my dad and his infectious laugh and charm. The way he'd smile at me with those loving eyes. And growing up, I wanted to be just like my dad. And my dad's messages celebrating individualism, achievement, and self-reliance long shaped my worldview, convincing me that my human will alone could solve any problem I set my mind to. But I couldn't figure this one out. I struggled for years to hold on to these beliefs until finally I was desperate enough to try something different. I was willing to step away from old voices and be open to something new. I consider this one of the biggest acts of bravery I've taken in my life. And as I did, I moved into a new place of listening, of understanding myself. And it became clear to me that true freedom and empowerment lies in recognizing and nurturing one's own inner voice. And what I found when I listened closely to my true self was this plea for deep connection with others, not competition with others. And it's not by accident that I followed this calling for true connection, that after I did, it led me to join the worship arts team here, where being a part of continues to deepen my relationship to all of you and the world around me. I'm grateful to be on this path of finding more compassion and understanding with all of you. I want to welcome you now to a time of silent meditation, and this can be your time to reflect on where your journey's taken you, or it might just be a time to revel in some pause and silence. Go ahead and reground your body again, and close your eyes and take a deep breath. Each month, at the Unitarian Society, we share our offering with a group or organization that's living out our values in the world. And the outreach offering recipient for June is the USSB Immigration Justice Fund. I'd like to invite up John Altman, a member of our Justice and Equity team, to share more. John.
Good morning. 2 weeks ago, Deb Karoff spoke about a trip that several members of our congregation's Justice and Equity team took in April 2022 to visit with asylum seekers at the La Cubina shelter in Mexicali, Mexico. Our friends connected with one special family, moms Cristina and Luz, and their now 6-year-old daughter, Sofia. After 10 months in the shelter, the family was able to apply for formal asylum status and crossed legally into the U.S. Last week, Ellen Broidy spoke about their long wait to receive work permits. Members of the Justice and Equity team have maintained contact with the family, and many have provided financial assistance as Cristina and Luz awaited work permits. The family, now residing in Stockton, are the first recipients of this new fund. Through Cristina and Luz's experience, the J&E team is learning more and more of the courage and perseverance needed to navigate the difficult and frequently perilous immigration pathways in the U.S. and the often extraordinary resources required for success. We want to share another example of this. When the family entered the U.S. legally in May 2022, they arrived with not much more than the clothes on their backs. Among the things they didn't have were Mexican passports. They had their birth certificates, fortunately, and their national voter ID cards. They found that neither of these was of much use in opening a bank account in Stockton. In one more example of their resilience and resourcefulness, they visited the Mexican consulate in Sacramento in hopes of acquiring Mexican passports. Their applications were accepted, and they left with a form of ID which a bank would accept to open an account. We hope you will join us in continuing to support Christina, Luz, and Sophia until they are able to be more financially secure. For those of you at home, the text to give number appears on your screen. To have 100% of your donation go to this month's project, please write your check to USSB and write Immigration Justice Fund in the memo line. Please join me in saying the affirmation of gratitude and giving. Let us be grateful when we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful for those who share their gifts with us, for we are enriched by their giving. And let us be grateful even for our needs, so that we may learn from the generosity of others.
The smallest Matthew Grisette, composer.
I'm Jenna Tosh. I use she and her pronouns, and for the past 9 years, I've had the privilege of serving as the CEO of Planned Parenthood California Central Coast. In her poem, The Journey, Mary Oliver began, "One day, you finally knew what you had to do." My journey to this work began when I was 16 years old. I can still remember the pink and pale green flowery wallpaper in a bedroom where I sat on a bed with my best friend, and we watched 2 lines appear on the home pregnancy test she had just taken in the bathroom. I remember how it felt when she looked at me with huge, terrified eyes, and I asked her what she wanted to do. There was no doubt. It was clear she wanted to have an abortion. It felt like such an adult decision to make at 16 years old, but we were certain it should be hers to make. We were not sure if the adults in our life would agree. My friend was one of 6 children, and her parents were strict. They were politically conservative, Catholic, and we thought unlikely to be supportive. But much more significantly than that, they were unpredictable, and they had been verbally abusive to her in the past. She was scared of them. And I don't know where it came from, but a voice came into my head and said, "You have to call Planned Parenthood." I must have gotten it from health class or something I read in a book. I honestly don't know. And so this was over 20 years ago, which meant that to find a Planned Parenthood, we had to sneak into the kitchen and get out a big yellow phone book. And we found the number for the Huntington Health Center on Long Island. But my friend was practically frozen in fear, and she wouldn't even pick up the phone. So I called, and I pretended to be her. And the first question I asked was whether we needed parental permission for an abortion. And we lived in New York, so the answer, thank goodness, was no. And on the other end of the phone was a kind woman who helped us schedule an initial visit within a couple of days that I attended with her. At the visit, the health center staff confirmed that she was already about 10 weeks pregnant, and she scheduled an abortion. The next Saturday morning, her boyfriend played in our high school football game so as not to rouse any suspicions, and his friends who could drive brought us to Planned Parenthood. And when we got out of the car, we had to walk through a screaming group of protesters, and I was shocked. I was a 16-year-old girl, and men who must have been 60 plus were in my face calling me a killer. They knew nothing about us or why we were there. It was scary, and I understand now that was the point. And when we walked through the clinic doors, the first person I saw was the mother of one of our friends. And I was like, busted. But no, she approached us, she put her arms around us, and she said she was the person on the other end of the phone when we called to schedule the appointment. She was a volunteer, but she knew who we were. And so she came in that day because she knew we'd be there and she wanted to provide support. She looked at my friend and she said, "It's okay, you're not alone." And I can still remember how it felt to be angry and scared and sick from the screaming protesters, and then comforted by the embrace of a woman who I knew, who was there to help us, and who would keep our secret. And I remember thinking, that's how I want to be when I grow up. About a year later, I found myself seeking services at the same Planned Parenthood Health Center. And I was treated with dignity and respect. I got an exam, I asked questions, I received birth control pills. My visit was free, and the pills cost $10 a month. 2 years later, I went to college in Florida. It was 2001, and George W. Bush had just been elected president. Just 6 weeks into living away from home, where I had grown up in New York, September 11th happened, and the world was changing. I was 18, and I registered to vote in Florida for the first time. In the first election I voted in, there was a ballot measure to require parental notice for abortion, and I had a visceral reaction. Immediately, I was back on the bed, looking at 2 lines on the test and my friend's giant, terrified eyes, and imagining how it would have felt if the answer on the other end of the phone had been that minors couldn't have an abortion without their parents' involvement. I didn't need to think about it. The answer was clear to me, and I voted no. But as parental notice for abortion measures did in every state they've been introduced in, with the one exception of California, that ballot measure passed. And around the same time, I went looking for my local Planned Parenthood so I could get a checkup and a new birth control prescription. But when I found that Planned Parenthood, the hours had been greatly reduced and I couldn't get an appointment. I later learned that this was because then Governor Jeb Bush had cut their funding. It hadn't occurred to me until then that my experience with Planned Parenthood was a privilege based on living in a state like New York, and that not everyone had the same access to high-quality, affordable care that I did. It was my very first awareness of the real damage that politicians could do to reproductive health and safety. My first major in college was English, and eventually I changed to political science. For a long time, I assumed I'd be a lawyer. And then one day I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer, and I sort of didn't know what to do next. So when I graduated from the University of Florida in 2004, I floundered a little bit. I worked some jobs that I hated, where I made no money, and work that really had no meaning to me. I enrolled in a master's degree program at the University of Central Florida in political science. And in that program, I took a class on social services and met some people who were working as social workers, which was appealing to me. And eventually, one of them convinced me that I should explore a job in child protective services. And I got hired as a case manager, working with families with dependency cases, which means families with confirmed findings of child abuse and child neglect. My first case was an 18-year-old mom with 3 kids. The first born when she was 14. She was an undocumented immigrant from Haiti. The father of the children was an older man who was a drug dealer. After he abandoned them, she continued selling drugs, having no other way to feed and take care of her children. So I got her case, 22 years old, because after she was convicted for possession, she stopped selling, which meant she couldn't pay her bills. So she had a confirmed finding of child neglect because she lacked electricity, running water, and food in the refrigerator. Rather than providing her with support, the state of Florida removed her children from her custody. After being trained that my job was to help protect children from abusive parents, seeing children taken from loving parents lit a fire in me. I was angry. In the state of Florida, women, our lives, and our futures were not a priority. I saw plainly that the state where you live, how much money you make, where you're born, and the politicians in charge have power over whether you can live your life with dignity, plan a family, and keep your children safe. And so, although I didn't really know how to be an advocate or an organizer, I just jumped in. I tried to join a local national organization for women chapter, but found that the chapter was defunct. So I started a new one and became its president. I started working with campus organizers at the University of Central Florida, and we organized conferences, events, and rallies to raise awareness to the issues women in our community were facing. Attacks on our reproductive rights, intimate partner violence, navigating an unjust criminal justice system and immigration system. We were completely disorganized and not particularly effective, but we were bringing people together and talking about the ways that politicians were hurting people. And eventually, all of this organizing led me back to Planned Parenthood. I connected with the CEO of Planned Parenthood of Greater Orlando, who became a mentor to me. When I was 23, she hired me to work in the organization's education department. It was a very small team, which means eventually I took on a lot more work, including organizing, communications, and public affairs. And I realized I could have a career in nonprofit management, and that being part of a movement for reproductive justice could be my calling. So I finished my master's degree, and I enrolled in a PhD program where I learned skills like strategic planning, program evaluation, leadership, data analysis, and got to focus my own research on the work I was doing on reproductive health policies and their impacts. Eventually, I rose to CEO of that small Planned Parenthood affiliate. In a red state, with no state funding, with increasingly hostile politicians and laws, the work was grueling. And being the face of Planned Parenthood in a conservative community meant opposition. One day, my husband and our then 3-year-old son went on a walk around the block, only to return to about 30 anti-abortion protesters surrounding our home, shaking Bibles in our faces and trying to intimidate us. It was the first of several times that they came. And for years, we fought back, and eventually we won an ordinance banning residential picketing in the city where we lived, which meant they had to at least maintain a 50-foot buffer from our home. Around the time I was finishing my PhD, I was called by a recruiter about the position I hold today. My husband and I came to Santa Barbara to explore it, and we haven't looked back. In total, I've been part of the Planned Parenthood family for 18 years. And during my time at Planned Parenthood, we've had enormous policy successes and crushing political losses. We passed the Affordable Care Act under President Obama and made sure that birth control would be accessible without a copay. We passed historic rate increases in California, which enabled expansion of care and access across the state. But we also endured 4 years of the Trump presidency and the loss of the Supreme Court. For almost the entirety of my time at Planned Parenthood, we lived in fear that eventually the landmark Roe v. Wade decision, which made it clear that the constitutional right to privacy included the right to safely and legally end a pregnancy, would be reversed. 2 years ago, almost to the day, our worst fears came to fruition in the devastating but entirely predictable Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health decision. I'm proud of the local work we've done, both at the Planned Parenthood Central Coast Action Fund, our political arm, and at Planned Parenthood California Central Coast, the healthcare organization. Since I started, we've opened a new health center in Oxnard, we've expanded health services, and we've grown education and outreach programs to reach communities in all 3 of our counties. Planned Parenthood's 6 health centers in Santa Barbara, Ventura, and San Luis Obispo counties are the primary providers of important health services in our region, including abortion and gender-affirming healthcare. Patients can access a wide range of health services, regardless of their ability to pay, including birth control, cancer screenings, and sexually transmitted infection testing and treatment. But the amazing impact we're able to have locally is a sharp contrast to the dire reality of the moment. We no longer live in fear that Roe will be overturned. We see the reality of it every day. Abortion bans are hurting people, disproportionately people of color, people with low incomes, people who live in rural communities. Today, patients from 22 states are forced to travel hundreds or even thousands of miles from home to access basic health care that was constitutionally protected in this country for 50 years. Or they must remain pregnant against their will, and at times, at the cost of their health or even their lives. I'm going to tell you a story about a patient, I'll call her Michelle, who upon learning about her pregnancy when she was 6 weeks pregnant, was advised to travel to South Carolina from Texas for care. By the time she reached South Carolina, though, the law had just changed, and she could no longer complete her care there. So she returned to Texas, and at that time she was advised that the next closest state to receive care was Florida. So she saved her money, she made plans, but by the time she reached Florida, she had just exceeded that state's then 15-week abortion ban and couldn't receive her care there. So she returned to Texas. At that point, she had exhausted her resources. Thankfully, she found an organization that funded her travel to California, where she received an abortion at a Planned Parenthood health center. But by the time she received the abortion that she needed and deserved, she had spent unnecessary days away from her infant, she had missed time from work, and she had spent all of her savings. This is just one story of many, of patients who find themselves in the crosshairs of an unjust system of laws that disproportionately targets women, people who are poor, and people of color. And things have only gotten worse since then. Florida now has a 6-week abortion ban, cutting off care to the entire southeast of the country. And we await a Supreme Court decision this month on whether the federal requirement that emergency rooms must provide life-saving care includes a patient's right to receive an abortion to save their life. It's chilling. By now, almost everyone knows someone who has been impacted by an abortion ban. And the chaos and cruelty of abortion bans has led to the highest rate of public support for legal abortion since the 1970s. 8 in 10 Americans understand that at no point in pregnancy is a politician more qualified to make medical decisions than a doctor. Sometimes people ask me how I can stay hopeful in the face of such injustice. But the more I reflect on hope, the more I understand that hope isn't something we look for and find. It's something that we do. At Planned Parenthood, we live it. For our patients navigating a confusing and unjust healthcare system, when Planned Parenthood's call center agents answer the phone, when our health educators provide young people with information and skills they need to live healthy lives, when our clinicians and health center staff provide compassionate care to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay, when our volunteers and organizers raise awareness and engage the community in work to secure the future we all deserve, this work is hope itself. We don't live in fear. We live in the certainty that each person should have the freedom and the power to make their own decisions about their health care, their bodies, their lives, and their futures. And we wake up every day with the opportunity and the responsibility to provide that hope. So instead of looking for hope, let us all commit to be hope. I'd like to leave you with an excerpt from an Alice Walker poem. In our despair that justice is slow, we sit with heads bowed, wondering how, even whether, we will ever be healed. Perhaps it is a question only the ravaged, the violated, seriously ask. And is that not now almost all of us? But hope is on the way. As usual, hope is a woman herding her children around her. All she retains of who she was, as usual, except for her kids, she has lost almost everything. Hope is a woman who has lost her fear. Thank you.
Please rise and body your spirit for a closing hymn, 1053, How Could Anyone?
How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul.
And as we go forth into this beautiful and heartbreaking world together this week, may we remember that as challenging and uncomfortable as this work towards justice, equity, and more compassion is, showing up as our authentic, beautiful selves and following our heart's calling for truth will sustain this progress. We're in this together for the long haul, partners in this work party, and we gather in this community to nurture and inspire each other, to encourage growth and to move forward along that arc of justice. All of us need all of us to make it. And in this upcoming week of summer solstice, when the sun is high and strong and daylight energy is long, may recognizing the clarity and power in our true voices renew our inspiration to live out our values in this world, to take action, to do when the Spirit says do. As we extinguish our chalice now, may the light of love shine upon you, out from within you, be gracious unto you, and bring you peace. For this is the day we are given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Let us call out a blessing.
Call out a blessing.